in about 72 hours, the U.S. Senate will vote on the Clarity Act. If the vote passes, basically things from a structural perspective in this market will change. Bitcoin in self-custody, it'll be difficult for future administrations to make it a crime because your right to self-custody will actually be written into the law. And also, you will have the right under law to transact peer-to-peer on the Bitcoin network without being viewed as a financial institution and whatever consequences come along with that. Surprisingly, the Federal Reserve will be impacted by this law in that they will be prohibited from issuing a central bank digital currency, a CBDC. Good morning, everyone. Congratulations to the treasure hunt winner who managed to find the seed phrase in about 2 days, sweep the wallet, and get the 21,000 sats. I hope you guys really enjoyed your voyage across the Swiss Alps, that you took in the scenery, found some of the seed words, and overall enjoyed it. I have to say that it was a lot of fun putting together this episode. And in the coming months, as I travel a little bit more, I will definitely be working with my collaborator, Orange Manufacturing Group, to put more episodes like this together, because if the goal is to normalize self-custody, it is important to illustrate that Bitcoin is everything and anything. Bitcoin could be a train ride through the Swiss Alps. Bitcoin is bacon. If you know, you know. Bitcoin simply is. And so if you are still learning about how Bitcoin works, I think this is such a very pleasant and positive experience for you, for your friends, for your family, for your mom, for your dad, for anyone to experience Bitcoin in another way. So again, congratulations to the winner. In a few minutes, I will be revealing what the seed phrase is. But before we get to it, I wanted to say that in about 72 hours, the U.S. Senate will vote on the Clarity Act. So this act has been bandied about for quite some time now. There's been historic, I guess, confusion or conflict between the SEC and the CFTC about who has regulatory oversight over what they are calling the digital commodities space. So on Wednesday, the Senate will put this to a vote. And if the vote passes, basically things from a structural perspective in this market will change. Key players impacted by this include exchanges, brokers, dealers, the Federal Reserve, surprisingly, banks who've been sitting on the sideline just FOMOing about, all of those service fees they're losing because they're not active in the digital commodities space. And of course, regular American Bitcoiners. If this bill passes, what will happen is basically the CFTC will have regulatory oversight over the space. And exchanges, for example, will have to register with the CFTC and implement whatever rules and laws the CFTC puts forth with respect to regulating the spot market in this space. Banks will be able to finally jump in and figure out a way how to charge you fees, probably for custodying your Bitcoin or whatever, tokens they plan on launching. So they will be active in this space as well. Also, this is not my cup of tea, but if you've ever invested in a crypto project, there will be a little bit more clarity with these projects. The amount of tokens insiders can own, for example, I think it's capped at 10% or something like that, and they'll have to adhere to other laws. I personally, I'm still not a fan of that. Like any investment, you have to do a lot of research. You have to know who the management team is, what the arena is, what the total addressable market is. Like you still have to do your homework. So because this law could pass, because it's technically legal, it doesn't mean that it's a good investment. And surprisingly, the Federal Reserve will be impacted by this law if it passes, of course, in that they will be prohibited from issuing a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, which, I am no fan of politics, or certain laws I think are helpful, but this is not, something that I enjoy particularly. I tend to be a little bit cynical, but if this passes and if this actually plays out as they're presenting it, it's actually good for American Bitcoiners. No central bank digital currency, no surveillance from that perspective, no, we don't like the party that you're interacting with, so you could be cut off. I think that's quite positive. The other positive things about this law, again, if it passes on Wednesday and if it's actually operationalized the way they say it will be, is that Bitcoin in self custody it's not a crime, but it'll be difficult for maybe future administrations coming in to make it a crime because your right to self custody will actually be written into the law, which I find to be quite positive. And also transacting peer to peer. I remember a few years ago, there were, stories about like money transmitter licenses, if you're a developer, etc. But you will have the right under law to transact peer to peer on the Bitcoin network without being viewed as a financial institution and whatever consequences come along with that. So I think that's pretty positive. And if you're sitting on the sidelines and you kind of want to learn about Bitcoin, but you're kind of afraid that it could be illegal. If you're watching podcast episodes and you want to participate in the treasure hunt to find the seed phrase and sweep the wallet, but something in the back of your mind is saying, "Oh, what if I get caught or something?" If this act passes, hopefully it will provide clarity. See what I did there? Clarity Act. It provides clarity. The other thing that this law does not cover, however, is tax provisions. So the IRS will still be IRSing with respect to your Bitcoin. You still will have to follow local laws with respect to your taxes, whether you track your transactions, how you report on your transactions. That in itself will not change. So that is something to be very mindful of. I'm looking forward to seeing, of course, if this passes, how other countries and other jurisdictions react to this. A few months ago, I had Alexandra Lutchman on the podcast talking about, firstly, Trinidad and Tobago's crypto ban. And then she came back for an update to talk about the working group, the sandbox they established to navigate these laws. So I'm pretty confident that a number of countries, perhaps Trinidad and Tobago, will look at what's happening in the US from a regulatory standpoint and may adapt their laws to coincide with what's happening in the US. We are in a multipolar world. Things are definitely changing, but I still believe that the level of interconnectedness, if that's a word, between countries with respect to trade, with respect to settlement, is such that countries will still pivot and adapt based on what happens in the US. And what I'm really curious about is here on the continent of Europe. I'm in Switzerland. We have our own central bank. We're not part of the European Central Bank, but the ECB is plowing ahead with the central bank digital currency and with really tightening laws on especially exchanges in the digital commodities space. And so it'll be very interesting to see how or if the ECB reacts to this law, if it's passed again. And more importantly, how individuals, especially entrepreneurs in the space, how they react if and when this law is passed. So will they decide to pick up and go to the US or come to Switzerland or a more friendly jurisdiction with respect to building out their projects? Will they stay in Europe? It'll be really interesting to see how things pan out over the next few years. And I'd like to remind everyone that the first Bitcoin block was mined January 3rd, 2009. For some of you, it may seem like an eternity ago, but when you take a step back and you look at how quickly things are progressing, this is remarkable. I mean, like not even 10 years ago, Bitcoin was still, for criminals and illegal and whatever. And now the US Senate is going to vote on a law because they're trying to figure out how to wrap themselves around this space that's emerging and does represent the future, in my personal opinion. Okay, so let's recover this wallet. Here is the seed phrase: 1, theory; 2, marry; 3, can; 4, turtle. 5, crack. 6, this was a tough one, ketchup. And I intentionally did not upload the transcripts so that you wouldn't be able to use Gemini to, like, shortcut to the answer. So 6, ketchup. 7 is poet, Dead Poets Society. That's a really old movie. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it. 8, Galaxy, my Star Wars reference, which was also inspired by Ready Player One. I just read that book. I finished it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I loved it so much. So 8, Galaxy. 9, health. 10, cabin. 11, transfer. And 12, oyster, the mollusk not found in Swiss lakes. Done. And I'm going to hit import. And while that's importing, guys, let me know if I should continue with episodes on Wednesday or whether we should move to Saturday or Sunday. I appreciate that this podcast is not necessarily something you can play in the background while you're doing other things. And it does require a little bit of concentration. So if you think Saturday or Sunday is a better day in terms of giving you time to fully engage in the treasure hunt, then fantastic. Boom, there we go. Those are the seed words. So comment below and let me know if we should move episodes to Saturday or Sunday, or if we should stick with Wednesday. And also comment if you're based in the US, let me know what your thoughts are on the Clarity Act and this vote that's going through on Wednesday. If you are based in Europe, let me know if this vote goes through, how this will impact your plans moving forward, whether you'd consider moving to the US or another country or Bitcoin friendly jurisdiction. And that's it. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful, wonderful week and look out for the Senate vote coming up on Wednesday. Bye.